welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo. And of course, we have Wilds of Eldraine spoilers coming out, and I'm going to end up doing this a little bit differently than I normally do because as it happens, I was out of town the day that the spoilers dropped and for the next day as well. So I'm a little bit behind, and obviously I already looked at a lot of these cards. You know, I was keeping up on them, but there's not going to be any surprises here. There are already a bunch of commanders that I've already looked at it, so it's not necessarily going to be first reaction or anything like that. What it is going to be is a bit of an evaluation. Like, I'm going to look at a bunch of commanders here and then sort of evaluate them, and I'll be honest, I'm going to be a little negative here because there's not really a whole lot I've seen so far. I mean, I've seen about, I don't know, at least 15 commanders probably from this set, and not a lot really piquing my interest. They're certainly not blowing me away. I mean, there are a few, but there's a whole lot that are definitely not very exciting at all. I'm going to start out with Kellen, the fey-blooded, for obvious reasons, because it is an adventure commander, which is something that I suspect, you know, really at this point, we're going to get a commander for everything, right? And I'm going to get back to that as this video goes on, because, you know, it's getting to the point now where there really is nothing that they won't do as far as a legendary creature, or, you know, which is obviously a possible commander. They're going to hit everything. So obviously an adventure commander is something that, you know, if I was predicting things that we would have gotten from this set, a adventure commander is one of them. That being a commander with an adventure on it, right? Which of course this one is. Kellen, the fey-blooded, 2 and a red, legendary creature, human fairy, 2/2 with double strike. Other creatures you control get +1/+0 for each aura and equipment attached to Kellen, the fey-blooded, and has an adventure part. Birthright boon, 1 and a white, sorcery adventure. Search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So obviously this is an adventure commander. The other big thing here is that your commander is a tutor in the command zone, which is kind of a big deal. There is some stuff to talk about here in general as far as an adventure commander goes, and I've already heard some people sort of questioning what the rulings here is. It's really pretty simple, I think, and I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure it's fairly cut and dry what's happening here if this is your commander. First of all, this is a white and red commander. This is a Boros commander, a Boros deck. Confusion comes in with the whole adventure part and the fact that essentially an adventure doesn't exist unless it's on the stack. That's the rulings of adventure. So again, you do not have a sorcery in the command zone here, right? Which is what some people might be getting confused about. The sorcery adventure part here doesn't exist unless this is on the stack. That's the only time that this part exists, or unless a card specifically references, you know, a card with adventure. It's going to obviously reference this because it has adventure, but this is a creature in the command zone, a legendary creature, human fairy, and nothing else. And when it's in your graveyard, it's not a sorcery. When it's in your library, when it's anywhere else, it is not an adventure. Now, because of that, because you're ignoring the adventure part everywhere else, people will say, oh, well, isn't this just a mono red card? No, with the rules of commander, I think are very specific in this, where you have that pip on the card. Maybe the rules committee makes a special ruling here. I don't know. But as far as I know, this is a Boros commander. The other issue, of course, is with casting your commander. And I've heard some people, you know, asking questions about command tax and all of that. Commander tax is only from the command zone. Whenever your commander goes back to the command zone, however many times that is, that's how many times you're paying the commander tax. That is all. So the adventure part has nothing to do with anything here, right? If I cast the adventure part, and of course I search for an aura, an equipment, whatever, then I typically would exile my commander. The Kellen part would get exiled. It would go on adventure and I could cast it later. Now, if I change zones with my commander at any time, I can then send it back to the command zone. So if you cast the Birthright boon, and again, I don't know if there's special rulings here, but this is how I am deciphering it as far as the rulings of how commander works typically. I cast this for the, cast the Birthright boon part. It is going to exile upon resolution. When it gets exiled, again, the rulings of commander is whenever your commander changes zones, you can choose to put it in the command zone instead. So if it goes to the graveyard, exile, gets shuffled into your library, whatever, even bounce to your hand, you can choose to put it in the command zone instead. So you can cast the Birthright boon and then choose as it resolves to put it in the command zone instead of putting it in exile. I don't know why you would do that, but you certainly could. Maybe you really have no interest in the Kellen part and you just want to cast the adventure again a second time, in which case you would have to pay 4 mana, obviously, because now you have to pay the commander tax because it has gone to the command zone, right? So typically, though, I think you would do that and then let it go to exile, go on an adventure, and then cast the Kellen side. And then if it dies, it goes back to the command zone, in which case, yes, technically you've cast your commander twice, but not from the command zone. You've only cast it once from the command zone, so you will have one commander tax, right? So it should not be confusing here at all. I don't know if there's going to be any special rulings here, but pretty cut and dry. Now, as far as a commander goes, just another Boros and equipment commander. I mean, honestly, yes, you do have the adventure part. It is slightly different, but at the end of the day, this is just another Boros and or an equipment commander. And I don't know if, there might be some people out there with Boros or an equipment decks already. I'm sure there's a lot of people that already have them, and they might swap this guy out as the commander. Having a tutor in the command zone is great. They might do that. Other than that, it's going to go in the 99 of all those decks, right? So again, now we have, 5, 6, 7 of these Boros or an equipment commanders. Swap them out however you see fit. Doesn't really change a whole lot, in my opinion. So again, there's not really much to talk about other than the fact that it's an adventure. Speaking of which, we got Beluna Grand Squall, blue, red, and a green legendary creature giant noble, so a teamer commander. Trample 4/4 permanent spells you cast that have an adventure, costs 1 less to cast, and of course has an adventure side. Seek Thrills, 2 green, blue, and a red instant adventure. Mill 7 cards, then put all cards that have an adventure from among them into your hand. So again, there's almost nothing to talk about here. This is just run-of-the-mill adventure commander. I don't know if people are going to get excited about this or not. You just put all the adventures in there. And of course, because we have another set that is going to have a bunch of adventures, it would be very easy to do so. I just cast the instant side. I mean, I guess, the one interesting thing is, do you cast the creature side first? Or do you wait to cast the adventure side, right? Because, of course, if I cast the creature side, I don't get to use Seek Thrills at all. Now that's completely gone. You can get into some shenanigans here where you can bounce your commander back to your hand, then cast the instant side later, maybe. If you're running out of steam, that certainly could do that. I mean, there are, I suppose, some nifty things you could do with regards to that, because you can bounce your commander, cast the other side, the adventure side, then cast your commander from exile. Sure, that's kind of neat, I guess. At the end of the day, though, just doing adventures, right? There's really not much to talk about here. It's so on the nose, right? And there's a lot of these commanders that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about a bunch here that they're just so on the nose that there's not really anything to talk about. It's super obvious what you're going to be doing, right? So for example, Johann, apprentice sorcerer, 2 blue and a red, legendary creature, human wizard, 2/5. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. Once each turn, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from the top of your library. So just another Izzet Spellslinger commander. I just talked about this in the archetypes video that I did earlier in the week. It is tough to do a Izzet deck, and this is one of the reasons I don't have an Izzet deck. I don't love blue and red in general, but it's so hard to do an Izzet deck where you're not doing that theme, because every time they go back to this well every single time. There's just so many now that, again, now you see this and you're like, okay, who's going to play this? I mean, is anyone have an Izzet deck where they're going to swap this guy out? Not likely. Is anyone going to go after this? I mean, I realize this is not a commander set. As a commander, I'm evaluating these as a guy who plays only the commander format. So this is just another Izzet Spellslinger commander that I imagine nobody's going to go after, because there's at least 4 or 5 better options for doing that, right? And again, I'll point out, we don't need it. I'm not sitting here being bummed out that we don't have another really good Izzet Spellslinger commander. We certainly don't need it. We don't need any commanders, period. They could stop printing legendary creatures for the next 5 years and I wouldn't be upset about it, because I'm still going back to sets from like years ago and exploring commanders that I haven't had an opportunity to do so yet. So I don't want people to think I'm bummed out that we're not getting a bunch of great commanders here. I'm not at all. We don't need it, but I am still going to evaluate these commanders on whether or not I'm going to get excited about it. And who's getting excited about this commander? Certainly nobody, right? All right, moving on to another commander that I'm sure no one's going to get excited about, Lord Skitter, Sewer King. Again, this is another commander that certainly I don't think anyone was asking for, because it's just another mono black rat tribal commander. 2 and a black, legendary creature, rat, noble, 3/3. Whenever another rat enters the battlefield under your control, exile up to 1 target card from an opponent's graveyard. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 1/1 black rat creature token with this creature can't block. So as a commander, I doubt anyone's getting excited about this. It's a little, slightly different than all the other mono black rat commanders out there. And also, Obviously, again, another one that's going to go in the 99, right? If I have any mono black or even several colors, I don't know what other color combinations there are for rat tribal decks out there, this can certainly go in the 99. It's great graveyard hate. You always need graveyard hate in your deck. So if you have a mono black, I mean, you're already going to have Bojuka Bog, but here's another great option. It's spitting out those rat tokens. Why not? Right? I'll just say though, this also is a pretty good fit in a lot of decks, like, you know, any deck where you just want sack fodder. Like an Ophiomancer is a card where it's just such a great card in a commander game because it's great in any aristocrat strategy, like any strategy where you want to be spitting out those tokens to sacrifice, like you want sack fodder. This guy's the same way, right? This is a great card, really great value card. Again, it's doing the graveyard hate thing. So I have this guy come down, and then at the beginning of combat on my turn, right away, I spit out a rat token that is going to first exile a really important card out of my opponent's graveyard, which is great. So it's graveyard hate. And then I can sacrifice that rat to some aristocrat's effect or whatever I want to be doing. So commander wise, you know, I would never go after this guy as a commander. I don't think it's a great commander, but I think it's a great card in the 99 of any deck that is not doing rat tribal at all. It's a great card in the 99. Really good card. Let's look at Greta Sweet Tooth Scourge. 1 black and a green. Human warrior 3/3. When Greta Sweet Tooth Scourge enters the battlefield, create a food token. Pay a green. Sacrifice a food. Put a +1 counter on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. Pay 1 and a black. Sacrifice a food. Draw a card. You lose 1 life. So another black and green food command. I mean, we already have black and green food commanders. They could have at least done this in a different color. Maybe black and red, or, I mean, I guess it probably has to be green. I don't know. You know, I mean, we just got a bunch of food stuff with the Lord of the Rings set. So, I mean, sacrifice a food to draw cards, pretty good, right? I like that there's 2 options there. You could build a decent deck around this. Again, I don't think anyone's getting excited about it because we already have this. We already have black and green food commanders. So it's not like anyone's like going, oh, wow, I can finally build a food deck. No, we already have, I mean, we have, again, after Lord of the Rings, we have a ton of commanders that are doing the food thing. And we already have even black and green commanders that are doing it. So it's not like everyone's like, oh, wow, finally. Certainly not. There might be some people that might swap this out because they think it's a better commander. It's possible that someone sees this and is like, okay, this is going to put me to the point where now I actually want to build a food deck. Maybe. I don't think there's a lot of people doing that though. Let's look at Aria of the Charmed Apple. 1 white and a black. Human warlock 2/4. Each creature that's enchanted by an aura you control can't attack you or a planeswalker you control. That's all right. That's not bad. It's a reason to put auras on your opponents. So we're doing the aura theme, but it is a little bit different. So that's nice. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life for X the number of auras you control. So we have our win con on our commander. This is very much a pillow fort commander. I'm just going to want to put auras on all my opponent's creatures and then just sit back and drain my opponents. It's certainly a deck that people aren't going to like playing against, I imagine. I think it might be pretty popular. Obviously, there's going to be a ton of support in this set for the aura theme. They have the roll thing. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm not going to really touch on it here. I'm sure people have seen it. They're basically token auras that you're putting on creatures, be it your opponent's or yours. I don't know how I feel about it. The jury's still out there. I don't know if I love it. I usually don't love brand new things. You know, I mean, it's okay, I guess. There's certainly going to be a lot of support for this. This actually might be a really popular one. Again, though, it's really on the nose. There's not really a lot of super interesting things you're going to be doing here. You're just going to be it's very obvious what you're going to be doing. I'm going to be putting auras on my opponent's creatures so they can't attack me, and then I'm going to sit back and drain them all. I mean, I guess you're gaining life, right? You gain X life, and so you can do some life gain stuff, which black and white does really well. So you could throw that in there. You could throw auras on your creatures as well, although you don't need to attack because your win con is stapled on your commander. So I think this might be a popular one. Again, I don't find this particularly exciting. It might be one people actually go after. Let's talk about Hylda of the Icy Crown. And this one I particularly wanted to talk about because, you know, it's funny. This is a commander that if it would have come out like 2 or 3 years ago, I probably would have been pretty excited. I would have thought it was really unique and interesting. And now I'm like, it's kind of bumming me out when I see commanders like this now. So 2 white and a blue human warlock 3/4. Whenever you tap an untapped creature an opponent controls, you may pay 1. When you do, choose 1. Create a 4/4 white and blue elemental creature token. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, or scry 2, then draw a card. So I will first say the thing I'm kind of bummed out about with this. I was talking about this with a couple of my patrons on my Discord, and I have another patron in particular that is really all about building the unique, janky themes, and no one else has a deck like that. And, very much like I am. And they are really just printing a commander for everything, right? Not only every archetype, we already got that, right? Printing a commander for every archetype, that was done a while ago. Now we're getting into the jankier themes. So now if I want to make a deck where I'm tapping my opponent's creatures down, I can do that as well, right? Or now if I already had a deck where I was doing that, I can do that. I mean, they're really, I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily. I don't know. I'm a little bummed out because I have a deck where I'm tapping my opponent's creatures. And, for me, I like to find a way to make that work. For me, that's the interesting thing about deck building is we find a way to make things work in our commander decks, right? Particularly about the commander format, that's important. And when your commander just makes it so easy, it's like, hey, you wanted to tap stuff down? Here we go. The fantastic payoff for tapping your opponent's creatures down if you wanted to be doing that. So again, just so on the nose. It's very obvious what you want to be doing. And I guess it's nice that some of these, unforeseen cards like Shoving Match is one that was brought up on my Discord that it would be a funny fit here. Verity Circle, as I've already talked about, there's a couple of different tapping commanders. So Verity Circle, go run out and buy your copy now because it might get a lot more expensive. And funny enough, I have that card in my Abishon deck because that's what my deck is doing, right? Borrowing 100,000 arrows. That's another card that I imagine is, it's a card you don't really see much in the commander format. And now maybe everyone's going to be doing it. I don't know, right? That's the kind of thing that I don't love, where it's actually becoming difficult in the commander format to do niche, unique things. Funny enough, I'm going to be doing my next 10 deck ideas video right away. And I've already had to cross a couple of things off that list. Like, here's some interesting deck ideas. Oh, well, they just printed a commander for that. So that's no longer an interesting deck idea because they just printed a commander for it, right? And in fact, I bet if you went and looked at some of my old unique commander deck ideas videos that I've done, you'd probably be like, oh, there's a commander that does that. Check that off the list. There's already a commander that does that they printed. So that's kind of the thing that I'm talking about, that I don't really love it, to be honest. Furthermore, I think this commander is just really, really powerful. Scry 2 draw cards, great. The fact that you have those 3 modes is great. Put a +1 counter on each creature you control. That's pretty great. I don't know if they did a lot of research for this, but tapping your opponent's creatures is not very difficult at all. Obviously, white and blue are the best colors for that, right? Already. There's tons of blue cards that do it. There's tons of white cards that do it. This is whenever you tap an untapped creature your opponent controls. Just like with Verity Circle, and what I do in my Abishon deck, of course, is I use my commander's ability there. And I literally just did this in a game the other day. I tap like 15 creatures and I get a card draw off of I draw 15 cards, right? It's one of the ways it's my big play in that deck, right? So again, here, I guess I could throw Abishon in this deck and, you pay the 3 blue mana, all your opponent's non-flying creatures get tapped and you got to pay the 1, but okay. Now I can pay 5 mana and create 5/4/4 element. Like, it's very easy to close out the game with this deck, I think. The scrying and drawing and all that's great too. It's very easy to, again, Deluge is a one-shot that I have in my Abishon deck that does the same thing. Just instant speed, bam, on my opponent's end step, tap all my opponent's non-flying creatures, and then pay 1 mana and just create a giant army of elementals. I don't know. It seems very easy to crank out elemental tokens or put +1/+1 counters on your whole team. This seems really powerful. And then on top of that, you're in the control colors. So it's very easy for me to leave up mana for counter spells and settle the wreckage and whatever else, and just sit back and then on my opponent's end step, tap down all my opponent's creatures, make a giant army, right? Similar to a Talron deck, you might be able to play this commander for that reason. So I don't love this commander for a few reasons. I know people might at first glance look at this and think, hey, it's kind of janky tapping. No, I don't think it is at all. I think it's very easy to get a zillion triggers off of your commander and things will get out of hand really fast. Speaking of which, with commanders that I think they went a little too overboard with, and maybe I'm getting this wrong. I had to actually, again, talk to my patrons on my Discord in order to make sure I wasn't reading this incorrectly. Rowan, Scion of War, 1 black and a red human wizard, 4/2 with menace. tap spells you cast this turn that are black and or red cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you lost this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. Now, of course, you don't want to lose life, but it's very easy to do so, right? In particular, with any black effect that gets you to pay life. And I'll use Necropotence as an example. I mean, that's a really powerful card already, but any card that is allowing you to pay any amount of life, right? Which there's got to be a bunch. I don't know. Necropotence comes to mind. I pay 20. I mean, on top of the fact that I'm getting a bunch of cards in hand, right? I pay 20 life into my Necropotence. So I've now lost 20 life this turn. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I'm evaluating this correctly. I then tap my Rowan. Spells I cast this turn that are black or red. So essentially every spell in my deck, except I can't do this with artifacts, obviously. So colorless, I can't cast an Ulamog for free. None of that. That's why they said black and red, obviously, right? Or this would be really stupid. However, I can now cast a Torment of Hailfire. X is 20 for 1 black mana or 2 black mana, right? Whatever Torment of Hellfire costs, right? The X is essentially however much life I've paid, right? Or Exsanguinate. Exsanguinate, X is 20, which now obviously the life I've lost is meaningless because I'm just going to gain it back and then some. So this just seems way too good. And that's just the black stuff. Obviously I could do the red stuff as well. Very easily this could be a CDH commander, I think, right? I don't know how many. Again, the Necropotence, I can just pay as much life as I want effects. How many are, maybe there's not as many as I think there are. Maybe there's enough to make this so this commander's super busted. It certainly seems like that kind of commander, the kind of commander that, I mean, what are you going to think? If this is across the table from me in a game, I'm going to be like, Torment of Hellfire X is 20 is coming at me pretty quickly in this game. That's my mentality if I'm sitting across from this commander. I don't see that as a good thing for anybody, including the person who's playing it. Similarly, we have Will, Scion of Peace, 1 blue and a white human wizard, 2/4 with vigilance. Tap spells you cast this turn that are white and or blue. Cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you gained this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So this one I think is way less powerful because, again, it's very easy to pay life. You know, there's a lot of those effects that you can just, because obviously paying life is a bad thing, typically, right? Here, you know, it's still really good. I still think this is really good. Now we can get into the busted scenarios here. I think that Rowan is probably better, but this one still, you can get into those busted scenarios where I cast Beacon of Immortality, gain 40 life, then tap my commander. All my blue and white spells cost 40 less to cast. And maybe this is even better. I don't know. All my spells are 40 less to cast. Then I stroke a genius. I mean, I just have to pay the 1 blue there. And then I draw half my deck. The wording here is important. Spells you cast this turn. So it's not the next spell. It's all the spells I cast this turn now cost 40 less. And I guess, you know, Beacon of Immortality is not cheap, but, you know, I mean, you don't even have to do that. Just I gained 20 life or something. You really could go nuts. And again, I think Rowan's probably better, but this seems pretty bananas too. Maybe I'm overreacting. I don't know. Couple of commanders I'll end off with here that I actually think are pretty interesting. Every commander I've talked about so far is either kind of boring and lame and not really getting me excited, or way too powerful, I think. Agatha of the Vile Cauldron, I think, is a pretty interesting one. Green and a red, human warlock, 1/1. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost X less to activate, where X is Agatha of the Vile Cauldron's power. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana. And 4 red and a green, other creatures you control get +1/+1, gain trample, and haste until end of turn. So I know people are going to say, hey, Demo, you were just complaining about all those other commanders that were super on the nose. And you're right. This is very on the nose. It's very obvious what you want to be doing here. Activated abilities of creatures you control. So you'll want a bunch of creatures with activated abilities. However, that covers a ton. And I think there's a lot of interesting ways you could go here. Like, for example, first thing that just popped into my head, levels. Okay, you could do a level deck here. That's why I kind of like this commander and I find it interesting. You know, those level up guys, those are activated abilities of creatures you control that you could do here. Is there enough to build a deck around? I don't know. But there is, again, you're going down the rabbit hole. Yes, it is very obvious what you want to be doing here, but so many different directions, right? This is comparable to like an Atraxa, for example, where, yeah, it's Atraxa, you want to be doing counters, okay, but that is such a broad spectrum that there's so many different ways. And obviously with an Atraxa deck, if you sit across from someone at a table, what are they going to be doing there? You don't know. With this commander, I would say the same. If I sat across from someone, I'd be like, okay, they're going to have a lot of creatures with activated abilities, but they could be doing a lot of different things. Now, there might be, this might be one of those commanders where it just becomes that you're doing that one thing because there's this one really great way to build this commander and everyone's going to do that. Maybe, I don't know. Obviously, with an Atraxa, there's a couple of different ways that people usually you're going to see, okay, if I'm across from an Atraxa, it's going to probably be Super Friends, Infect, or +1/+1 counters, even though there's 100 other ways you could go with it. That might end up being the same with this commander. I don't know. I think it's a really neat commander, and there's a lot of different ways. I'm interested to see the different directions people will go. Obviously, with that last ability, you can reduce your commander's own ability there, right? In fact, that last ability will never cost 6. It will always cost 5, unless someone gives your commander like -1, -0, if that ever happens, right? It's going to cost 5 right out of the gate. And then if you can bump your commander's power, obviously it gets even better. And obviously the ability is bumping your commander's power. So that's kind of where the neat interaction comes in here, where if I can get my commander's power bigger, then the ability costs less, which then bumps my commander's power more. Again, your win con is stapled on your commander. So you just get a bunch of creatures with activated abilities. And your commander's second ability there is sort of the win con because you can just give your creatures a big overrun effect. I think it's an interesting commander. It's a neat one. And it's also going to be a pretty popular one as well. And I'll end off with Ash Party Crasher, which is one that I'm just sort of like, I like it. At the same time, I'm kind of bummed about it. So red and a white human peasant 2/2 with haste has celebration whenever Ash Party Crasher attacks. If 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield and you control this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Ash. So I'm looking at that ability and I'm kind of liking it, but I'm also kind of bummed about it at the same time, right? Because I'm looking at this and going, oh, that's a neat thing we've never seen before, right? If 2 or more non-land permanents have entered the battlefield under your control, this turn you get some effect. However, the payoff we're getting is just that boring old put a +1/+1 counter on your commander thing that we've seen 1,000 times before. So, I have this interesting build around capability here where I want things to be entering the battlefield. I cast my whatever. I play a land, I guess, right? No, it's non-land. Never mind. Doesn't work with lands. I cast my Wayfarer's Bauble. That's a permanent entering the battlefield. Then I cast my commander, and that's the second permanent, right? If 2 or more non-land permanents enter the battlefield under your control this turn, and it's when your commander attacks. So I immediately attack with my commander because it has haste. I put a counter on it. That's pretty good. But first of all, I have to attack with my commander to get that trigger. So I'm already going down that road. I'm going down the Boros attacky theme. And also I'm putting counters on my commander, which lends me to the strategy of I just want to be doing a Voltron strategy again. So now I'm doing that as well. So we have something interesting here that I think could make a really neat build around where there are a lot of different directions you can go with it. But at the end of the day, I'm just attacking with my commander a lot and I'm putting +1/+1 counters on it. So I probably just want to be getting in for damage and I'll probably end up just winning by hitting with commander damage. So that part of it is like kind of, it's makes it a little less interesting. It's still pretty interesting, I guess. Just not super interesting. What do you guys think? I talked about a bunch of commanders here, and I don't know how many spoiler videos I'm going to make from this set. Again, I would say of all the commanders I've seen so far, there's only a couple that I find to be pretty interesting. There are certainly a couple that are really powerful and are certainly going to be getting a lot of attention. The fact that there are commanders that are also adventures, people might want to do it just for that reason, right? A lot of people out there might want to use Kellen just because, I already have a Boros or an equipment deck and I just want to have an adventure as my commander, and they might swap out for that reason, right? So how many people are going to be doing that? I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments below what you think of these new commanders. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.